The release of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword back in 2011 was very important to the Zelda series, for a number of different reasons. From marking the 25th anniversary of the historic and now household name Zelda series, to introducing full-on motion controls in a Zelda game, to undoubtedly the most significant piece of importance, giving us a game that tells the story of the very beginning of Hyrule and the first game in the official Zelda timeline. Love it or hate it, Skyward Sword is without question one of the best games in the series in terms of lore and story. Where it struggles in combat controls and side activities, it makes up for in its incredibly rich history content. The game tells us the story of how the Kingdom of Hyrule came to be, along with the backstory to Demise and his ultimate fall, including the malice-filled curse he plagues on the newly found land of Hyrule. Aside from the big talking points of the lore and story, there is actually a lot of really interesting facts, characters, and things unique to this game. Skyward Sword is the only game we can obtain the gratitude and evil crystals within, the game we see the legendary Blade of Evil's Bane, the Master Sword, and how it was forged and built into the triumphant blade found in future adventures in the timeline, and one of my personal favourites in today's topic, the only appearance of the Loftwings. The Loftwings are essentially giant birds, similar to a pterodactyl but with more feathers. The majority of civilization lives in the sky in this game, and the Loftwings are a means of transport, but are also highly protected and praised as the people of Skyloft, the eventual Hylians, believe that the Loftwings are a symbol of the divine protection granted to them from the goddess Hylia. There are a few different kinds of Loftwings that we will touch on later in the video, but something interesting and potentially heartbreaking happens at the very end of the game. At the end of Skyward Sword, once the people of the sky move down to the surface to create Hyrule, we see the Loftwings belonging to Princess Zelda and Link fly off into the distance, but they don't come back. They actually fly off into the distance, never to be seen again. To this day, we still don't know what happened to the Loftwings at the end of Skyward Sword, but today, I'm going to theorize into just what happened to the Loftwings after the events of Skyward Sword, and try to uncover their unexplained and unknown disappearance. To begin, let's examine and get a good understanding of exactly what a Loftwing is. A good thing to note firstly is that it's custom for every single citizen of the skies to own their own Loftwing. Right off the bat, we can clearly see they are some sort of bird-like creature, but on a much larger scale, and as mentioned in the intro, they are primarily a means of transport for the people of the skies. In the game, we can also find out that there are a few different kinds of Loftwings. There are the standard everyday Loftwing, which the everyday civilian would have for flying the skies during the day. There is the Loftwings that have been specifically trained to be able to fly at night, as the standard Loftwing can't see particularly well in the dark. And then there is the most notable Loftwings, which are reserved for the higher ups, such as Princess Zelda, her father, and Link, with Link's personal Loftwing being known as the Crimson Loftwing, presumably named after the colour crimson red. No shit, mate. That's all we really know about them, along with the fact that they are considered to be very close to the goddess Hylia, and practically a sacred animal to the people. Now that we know some basic information about the majestic birds, let's start digging into why they disappeared at the end of the game. Considering we see them fly off into the distance, it's obvious they didn't just die out then and there on the spot. And after some research, digging, and thinking, I believe there could be 3 possible reasons as to why they went extinct or just disappeared. We shall go over them one by one and discover which one is more likely, and hopefully come to some sort of conclusion of what definitively happened. The first possible reason is that once the people of Skyloft, now the Hylians, settled on the surface, they had no need for the Loftwings, so they pretty much neglected them, resulting in extinction. Whilst definitely possible, I do see a few flaws here. We are told within the game that the people look at the Loftwings as sacred beings, so even if they did return or stay once the people had settled, it's very likely the Loftwings would have been cared for. even if that means just simply feeding them and keeping them healthy whenever they stop by. The Hylians would definitely not neglect something so sacred to them, as if you know your Zelda games, you'll know that when something is sacred in these adventures, the people take it very seriously. So that writes off the first possible reason. Secondly, the now Hylians tried to domesticate the Loftwings further as they no longer needed them for travelling the skies. But the domestication didn't work out so well, resulting in eventual extinction. Hearing that at first, you'd probably think that's even more unlikely than the first option, but I personally see this one as slightly more likely. The definition of domestication in terms of an animal is an animal tame and kept as a pet or on a farm. The Loftwings somewhat fit into that. They aren't kept as pets or caged up, despite Groos's attempt, and they aren't kept within some sort of farm or set location within the sky. They are given freedom to roam around anywhere in the sky and come to their designated civilian upon a command whistle. They partly fit into being domesticated animals, but also don't, so it's sort of a grey area. It's fair to say there has to be more work done with them before being considered fully domesticated animals. So let's say the Hylians did try to domesticate them further, with the implication of trying to make them home pets or even just land pets. Domestication in the real world can take as little as a few thousand years to as much as a few 100,000 years, and considering Skyward Sword is at the very beginning of the Zelda timeline, there could have been thousands of years between the next few games in the timeline. We aren't given exact timeframes between games, but considering the advancements in society in games taking place after Skyward Sword, we can assume that there is at least a good few thousand years in there, possibly more. From our knowledge given to us in Skyward Sword, this would be the Hylians' first attempt to domesticate them fully, meaning it could work, but could also end in disaster, in the form of a long-term extinction due to failing to domesticate them. It's not very likely, but it's more than likely than the first reason, because it still comes under a way of caring for them. But whilst failing to domesticate the Loftwings is very possible, it would have to be tragically fail to result in a mass extinction. So for that reason, I'd say this possibility is relatively unlikely, but we still have one more potential reason to discuss. The third and final reason for the disappearance of the Loftwings is that over time, they slowly evolved into the Oocca found in Twilight Princess. I know what you're thinking, no chance, but hear me out. This could actually make a lot of sense. To begin trying to prove this possibility, let's look at the facts. Both the Loftwings and the Oocca are inhabitants of the sky, and also both regarded as sacred beings. Proof of this is found in the Loftwings case when we are told the Loftwings are the divine protection sent from Hyrule, and in the Oocca's case we are informed by Shad, a researcher in Twilight Princess studying the Oocca and their history, that Goddess Hyrule created the Oocca at the same time she created the Hylians. Now, the term creating the Hylians is slightly subjective, as they weren't technically Hylians until they settled on the surface at the end of Skyward Sword. Yes, they have been referred to as Hylians, but the actual kingdom of Hyrule wasn't established until the end of Skyward Sword. So it's hard to tell if Hyrule meant the literal creation of them when they were originally on the surface before the surface was formed into the Kingdom of Hyrule, or when they officially became Hylians upon the creation of the Kingdom of Hyrule at the end of Skyward Sword. Confusing, I know. That aside, there are other points to look at. Shad in Twilight Princess tells us that when Goddess Hyrule created the Hylians, the Oocca simultaneously moved to the skies, and we do find out that the Oocca have a home in the sky, known as the City in the Sky. The interesting piece of information here is that the Oocca left for the skies at the same time of the creation of the Hylians, meaning the Oocca already existed prior to the Hylians, which also falls in line with the Loftwings, as they presumably also existed prior to the Hylians or the people of Skyloft. So if the quote-unquote creation of the Hylians did imply them officially being Hylians upon the long-awaited return to the surface, then that would line up with the time of when the Oocca left for the skies. Well, I believe that the Oocca leaving for the skies, which Shad tells us about, could have actually been the Loftwings leaving for the skies, and for multiple reasons. Firstly, the Loftwings were, as previously mentioned, considered to be protection sent from Hylia. This is because Hylia moved all of her people to the skies when Demise first invaded the land. The Loftwings were a means of protection for her people, now living in the sky. But as you know, at the end of Skyward Sword, Skyloft descends to the surface and moves the people of the skies down to the surface, which then went on to become Hyrule, making them Hylians. Since they were now on the surface and safe from Demise following his demise to Link, they no longer needed such divine protection in the form of Loftwings. So the Loftwings left and headed off for the skies. This is more speculation, but I'd say it's relatively fair to assume that then Hylia created the city in the sky for the Loftwings that left at the end of Skyward Sword. A big part that could make this the case is that Shad in Twilight Princess isn't fully knowledgeable on the Oocca. He is still currently researching during the events of Twilight Princess. Both the Oocca and Loftwings are bird-like creatures, and more importantly, close to a god. We are told the Oocca were close to gods, but Shad doesn't specify on who. But considering Hylia is a god, and both the Loftwings and Oocca are considered close to them, it's not unlikely that Shad has discovered the connection between the Loftwings and the Oocca without even knowing it. He is researching a time thousands of years ago, and through old statues, carvings, and notes, so it's not unlikely the depiction of both the Oocca and Loftwings were massively similar on paper. As for the evolution part, we know that that's actually 100% possible. The Zora managed to evolve into the Rito to adapt to their new life in the flooded land of Hyrule during the events of the Wind Waker, and that wasn't even the works of Hylia. That was a natural transition over many years for the Rito. So, with or without Hylia's help, the Loftwings of Skyward Sword could have easily evolved into the Oocca upon Goddess Hylia calling them back and forming the city in the sky. We are told in Twilight Princess that the Oocca were close to the royal family, and if they are an evolution of the Loftwings, that also matches up. The Loftwings were close to the closest thing to the royal family at the time, Zelda's father and Zelda herself, along with Hylia, who reincarnated as Princess Zelda. There is also the possibility that once Hyrule was formed at the end of Skyward Sword, the Loftwings returned in the form of the Oocca, during a time frame we don't actually get to see in any of the games. That could be what Shad references when he tells us the Oocca were once close to the royal family. Additionally to all of that, both the Loftwings and Oocca are there to help the Hylians. They serve similar duties, if you will. To me, this is the most likely possibility. You could even say that the creation of the city in the sky was a form of reserving or holding the helpers from Hylia until the time comes that they are required again. And during that time of being on standby, they evolved into more intelligent beings, the Oocca. Of course, this theory does involve some speculation, but more due to the fact that we don't have 100% confirmations, but we do however have valid reasons to speculate. Technically, we can't say they went extinct, but considering there is no mention of them after Skyward Sword, and no signs or memories of them other than little Easter eggs, it's safe to assume that the Loftwings did go extinct in the mind of the Hylians. But what I believe to have happened is that the disappearance of the Loftwings is not due to extinction, but due to the fact they evolved into the Oocca found in Twilight Princess, remaining as helpers to Goddess Hylia. Thanks a ton for checking out the video, it's very much appreciated. As always, this is just my personal thoughts and theories on the topic. What do you think? Do you agree with the theory of evolution? Or maybe even one of the other two ideas? Or maybe even a theory of your own? Whatever it may be, let me know down below in the comments. I want to let you guys know that I truly appreciate all of the support that has been given to me over the past 3 years, coming on 4 at the beginning of January 2020. Here are the people who managed to guess what the video would be about based off the teaser I put out prior to uploading. If you'd like to have your name featured in a future video, be sure to look out for teaser posts that I put out on my YouTube community tab, Twitter page, and Discord. All the links will be below. A special thanks goes out to all of my Patreon supporters, as your support means the world to me. Thank you so much. It means the world to me, and until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.